All right. Well, welcome to another expert interview. As always, we just jump straight in. Bob, tell us who you are and what you do, man.
Who I am? Well, that's a loaded question. I am a middle-aged human, and my passion is coaching. So most people in my life know me as Coach Reg, and it's because for the last 37 years of my life, I've been coaching high school basketball. Not high school basketball the whole time. My current state is high school basketball coach. I coach the JV at my alma mater. My one of my good friends from high school is the head coach, so that's kind of who I am in my real life. I've got a wife of 30 years. I got two daughters who are age 23 and 21. We just got back from a great trip down to Tampa and also Disney. And in my spare time, I run a business called Feedstories. My partner, Brandon Boyd, and I have a company that helps people leverage the power of stories to scale and grow their business. And so we help them to leverage that using video, capturing their stories, and helping them launch them out to the world. So that's who I am and what I do.
Love it, man. How was Disney?
Disney is so interesting. You spend a lot of money, you walk 10, 12 miles a day, you're completely exhausted, but you're completely enthralled. Like, it's such a playground for all types of ages. And one of the best things we learned is that it's so much more fun to take your adult children to Disney versus little ones. Because we've done the whole stroller thing, like where you're running around the parks and there's meltdowns, and our kids are pretty chill, but when they're tired and there's no naps, and you just, as adults, we're walking around and we're seeing kids having meltdowns and there's ice cream over their faces, and we're like, wow, it's really cool to be here as a family. So it's about our fifth or sixth time as a family, and we just really enjoyed going on the things we wanted to. And Disney's like, it's the ultimate story experience. So for me, it was like, I'm looking at things, they immerse you in a story, like there's sights, there's sounds, there's smells, at different points of the park. You find yourself going to sleep at night, and you got these like sing-songy songs going on in your head, because no matter where you're at in the park, they play a different tune. And I think the best thing that Disney has done is they've leveraged technology. So they've got this Disney app, and they have this called the Genie experience. It allows you to optimize your day. It allows you to order food. So you're never wasting time standing in line. Certainly you're going to stand in lines for some things, but it allows you to like stand in virtual queues. And so it allowed us to do everything we wanted to do and then some, totally optimize our day. And it was a great experience. We were completely exhausted every day, but completely thrilled at the same time. So it was great to be able to do that. We haven't been, the four of us, because the girls have been in college, it's been a while since we were able to take a vacation together. So it was good from that aspect. But we started out the trip, the first week it was just my wife and I, and as you know, I love to golf, she loves to golf, so we got 10 rounds of golf in 8 days. So that
Woo.
was that was hardcore, but we absolutely loved it.
I love that, man. And I love your answer to the Disney question. We're big Disney fans and we do a lot of Disney stuff. And I love that you highlighted the storytelling part. And I think it's interesting to reflect on that, right? They
Yeah,
are the top level storyteller, but they transition that to the physical experience. And so I love how they immerse you and make you feel like
yeah.
you're part of it in every sense, right? So yeah, it's cool.
Every stretch of the word. And the cool thing is, they're essentially a media company. So what they do is they're leveraging the stories that you've seen on television in the movie theaters, and then they create physical manifestations of it, characters and rides and experiences. It's amazing, and they do it right. I know there's a lot of, you can find a lot of fault with certain things with Disney, and now it's a political thing. But if you just kind of chill and realize, like, they are world class at creating experiences for people, for families, and there's not many places on the planet that you could say that. So we spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time, spent a lot of energy, but we were thoroughly enthralled with it.
Love it, man. So talk to me about the business. What is the core service offering of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so like I said, we really specialize in working with clients that are kind of undertelling their stories. And our typical client is a professional. They have a high price product or service, and it's really driven by the owner. So most of our clients are in that 500,000 to probably below 10 million. We have a couple clients that are above that, but it's really leveraging the power of stories. So what we like to do is take personal stories, origin stories, customer stories, uh, pull that out of people. And when I say it, it's not a physical thing, it's not painful, but our belief is that the best video you're going to create is done through the power of questions and answers. So all of our videos are done with a live coach. You're never going to create a video with Feedstories in a blank atmosphere where you're just staring into a lens. There's always a live coach, and whether we do it remotely, which is about 90% of our video, or in person in a traditional way, we are going to use questions and answers from a live coach and director who are going to basically pull things out of you that you already know. And so we have a process that puts a plan in place where we are matching up content to your marketing or sales funnel. So before we go in, we have a plan for, like, we know what you're going to be promoting, we know where it's going to be promoted. And so we just have a process where we go through and we essentially build a sales story, build a marketing story through questions and answers. And we build that really without the client having to do much effort. They're never memorizing anything. They don't have to be good performers on camera. All they have to do is just kind of look good, have good energy, and answer questions in a way that we can then go and have our talented editors create stories for them. These stories are published on social, they're put on websites, they're part of, email sequences. You can deploy video stories in so many ways. You create one video, you can probably use it 10, 12 different ways, which is really powerful.
That's so awesome. So I'd love to dig in and I love to drive as much value as we can to anyone listening.
Mhm.
And so what are some, I guess let's go with the why first. I think it's a low ball question, but I think we probably
Yeah.
need it. So like why video? Like of all the choices we have today, like why should someone consider using video or doing more in video?
Well, it's pretty obvious if you interact with your mobile device in any way. Your major platforms are all driven by video. TikTok is obviously top of mind. It is a video platform. Instagram Reels, Facebook Stories, YouTube Shorts, like all of the content that you consume, if you think about it, most of it is video. There's certainly things that you're reading, you're reading emails, you're reading articles, but most of what you consume online now on your mobile device is video. So we obviously can't be in the same place at the same time and all over the place. And we certainly don't want to be working 24/7. So video is the ultimate way to leverage stories. You create stories once and then you leverage them in multiple ways. It's working for you while you're not. I think that's kind of the one of the reasons. The other thing is that you can get the story right once and then you don't have to fumble over it again. There's so much magic in the editing process. Certainly there's place for live video. We can do that. Actually, essentially we're creating live video right now, but the power of editing is that you can do it multiple times, especially if you're not a professional. And there's just magic in the editing process. So you can get a story right. And when you get a story right, you want to deploy it in multiple ways, and it's going to be deployed flawlessly every time.
So awesome. And there's some good highlights in there, right? I think the obvious is yes, it can be used everywhere. I love that you talked about repurposing a couple times
Yeah.
and using content in multiple ways. So let's talk about the person who wants to get started with video. And I love that you talked about just have questions.
Yeah.
What are some tips or tricks for someone who just wants to grab their phone and just record? Like
Yeah.
what can we tell them or give them some advice so at least they can get started?
Yeah. So, we've got some really powerful tools at our disposal. I mean, we're in the age of AI right now. What I used to tell people was there was a service called answerthepublic.com or Google Answers. So if you're at a complete loss as to what to talk about, if you want to generate educational content for a marketplace, you could go to Google, You could go to answer the public, but now it's very easy just to go to ChatGPT and you could say, what are the top 10 questions people are asking about? So if I were to create a video series about video marketing, I could literally get ChatGPT to crank out 10 ideas for videos. You could even ask it to give you some prompts. That's really the easiest way to go. Now, in the age of AI, one of the things that we're kind of promoting now is content is essentially free and everybody's creating it very easily. But what people are craving is authenticity. So, short of a deep fake video, which is probably coming, people do want to see you. They want to have an emotional connection. So they know that, hey, this is content. They're going to learn something, but what they really want is personality. So beyond that, what we really encourage you to do is to tell stories. So one of the most powerful things that you could do as a service provider or as a product owner is tell stories of customer transformation. So, we specialize in working with high-end businesses who have high fee programs. Well, you can imagine like there's a lot of opportunity for people to have transformations in those coaching programs, right? You want to capture and tell those stories. Now you can get them on camera, but it's very easy for you to go on and without, breaking their privacy. I could tell a story about Devin and what state Devin was in when he came to me and the type of problem that Devin had and what did we do together and what does his life look like now. So when we put new people on camera, we typically have them do two things. We ask them to kind of tell their origin story. So how did your business start? Most people have that down pat. And then we say, let's talk about 3 customer stories. Let's share some stories of people that you've worked with and the transformation they had. That gets the ball rolling and gets them really comfortable. And then if you can start to mix in some of that content stuff, researching ChatGPT or Google Answers or Answer the Public, you're going to have a really powerful outline of videos. And essentially, you're never going to run out of content.
Again, some awesome tips there. And I love the using the tools you have to build the list. I think a lot of people struggle with where do I start and just look for frequently asked questions. Like no matter how
Yeah.
you have to get to them, find them and then just answer
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
the authenticity piece, I love that you talk about that because I know a lot of people give pushback on like, well, do I need a full-time video person and a video editor? And do I have to have the right background and the right this and the right that? And it's like, look, if you're doing nothing, hit record,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
start. Now, if you're doing something and you're trying to elevate and have higher impact and fit it into your marketing and sales funnel, then that's when you call a guy like Bob and their team because then you can get hyper specific. But if
Yeah.
you're doing nothing, just start.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good advice. People get tripped up in like things that are down the line. It's very easy now to go live on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, and you could create a video. You don't even have to edit it. You could just go and do lives. You can go live on LinkedIn too, for Pete's sake. So that's where you start. There are tools. There are so many tools available, and they're coming out all the time that allow you to be able to do some of the stuff yourself. The one thing we tell people to do is like, don't get into editing. It's so difficult. It's so time consuming. You've got software that can do it. You've got individuals that could do it. There's services that have packages now. Editing is a process where if you're going for a specific action, you want to go with a company like ours. If you're just creating some stuff in general, there's plenty of places to go to get editing. But the idea here is you don't need to like have it all together. You just need to get started. So you're right. Everybody's carrying around the most powerful video camera ever produced in the world in their pocket every day. It shoots at 4K. And you don't even need to publish in 4K, but like it shoots in 4K. It has great sound, great looks. And if you follow the formula of telling stories and answering frequently asked questions, you're going to be a video person, whether you like it or not. But it's what your market's demanding. So yeah, take a step forward.
I say, yeah, do something. So speaking of stories, right? Tell us one. Give us an example of a client story. I'd love to hear one and kind of see the impact.
Yeah. So there's a couple I like to tell. First of all, Brandon and I have a really cool origin story. So Brandon actually, I met Brandon in a really unique way. Brandon's my current business partner, but he wasn't always my business partner. When I ran an agency, I ran an ad on Craigslist. Now, most of us know what Craigslist is. It's basically a big classified ad platform. And I needed a marketing manager. So I wrote an ad and I got pretty good at writing Craigslist ads. Like there was a formula to get good people. So Brandon was one that saw that ad. Now, Brandon didn't apply for the job. What Brandon did is he wrote me a customized, personalized website. So literally he replied with a URL and said, go here. And it was a sales letter. He sold himself to me. Now, what did he do? He showed off his marketing chops. He showed off his design chops. He was literally the perfect person for the job. So I got 25 people or so that responded to that ad in 2 days. Well, I didn't interview any of them because Brandon clearly understood the task at hand. So that's how Brandon and I started to work together. Unfortunately, we went through a great recession in 2009, had to fire my entire staff because our clients went bankrupt. We kept in touch until 2016. I got really good at Facebook ads. I was at a meeting at Facebook headquarters in Austin, Texas. And instead of learning like inside baseball about Facebook, which is what thought I was there to learn, all they talked about, Devin, was video. They essentially said, we are migrating our platforms to be video based. We're going to prioritize video. We are going to reward video. Your ads are going to get better traction. They're going to get better results if you use video. So that to me was like, oh, I get it. I literally left the meeting at lunch. I didn't leave the meeting, but I left the building to call Brandon from the parking lot and said, Brandon, this is what I heard. I would like to start a video company. Are you in? And he said, I'm in. So we essentially started Feedstories in September of 2016 from a parking lot in Austin, Texas, outside Facebook headquarters. I love that story. A better story is how I learned the power of video. And that's going back to 2013. I met a woman named Amy, and Amy and her husband got on the phone with me. They had been on my email list. And Amy told me a story about that. She was a CrossFitter and she loved to exercise, but she had this problem where she had a headband and she couldn't find a headband that would stay on her head. She would exercise and it would slip off, it would pop off. She liked to describe herself as having this funny shaped head and wispy hair. So she tried to find a headband that would work, couldn't find one, and had the classic entrepreneurial phrase, well, there's got to be a better way. She went out and researched different fabric. She bought it. She went home and she literally sewed headbands until she found one that worked. Once she found one that worked, she started creating her own. She wore them to the gym and her friends started asking like, hey, where do you get those? Can I have one? Then she knew she was onto something. At that point, they connected with me and said, we think we have something here. Can we do a test? Well, we did a test. We ran some Facebook ads and we sold some product. We then created a 30-second video on an iPhone. This is in 2013. It was low quality, but it essentially told her origin story in 30 seconds, the one I just told you. After that video was created, we ran it as an ad. 4 years later, it generated 150,000 customers. It generated 8 figures in revenue. That video was seen by 29 million women over that 4-year period. That one little video with an origin story connected with so many women. So she didn't just sell a bunch of headbands. She created a movement. She gathered people that were just like her. That became her tribe. It became the engine. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with her. The last thing I said to her was, you know, when this business is successful, you are going to get knocked off. People are going to see that you're selling headbands and go, well, I can do that. I said, they can try to knock you off, but the one thing that they can never knock off is your story. And that proved to be true. Many people tried to knock her off and sell headbands at a cheaper price. They did, but they never reached the level of success that Amy did, is because she told her story and she continued to tell stories and built an entire brand and movement around her Boulder Band headbands. And so that's my favorite story. And that's what just really solidified for me the power of video and the power of stories.
Hmm. So, and every time I interview someone, there's always a part where I tell people to go back and re-listen. That would be the time, because I think that what I really appreciate, one is by you telling your story, it's relatable, but it's also a great example of how to succinctly tell a story that is relatable, right? So
Yeah,
it serves two purposes. And so go re-listen to that. Go listen to how Bob explained his why and how it builds trust and authenticity between Bob and you, right? Which is crazy because you've never met Bob, right? And so there's value there. And then I love this story there on all she did is tell her story and again create relatability. And it
yeah.
had massive impact because there was no shine, there was no glitz, there was no crazy sales pitch. It was just authentic.
It is essentially it's hi, I'm Amy Krause. I have this wispy hair and I couldn't find a headband that would stay on my head. So I figured there must be a better way. So I created them on my kitchen table, and that's the story she told. And it was a very simple offer. It says, come join my community of active women at boulderbendheadbands.com. It was that simple.
I love that. So let's talk TikTok. I think TikTok's an interesting place to have a conversation, especially in the business world. Should business professionals or businesses in general be on TikTok?
So you probably should be interviewing Brandon about TikTok because he's a TikTok like dude. I've actually deleted it off my phone because I found it to be way too addictive. All right. Um, TikTok in general. So here's my advice on social media. So social media to me, all right. Now there's others might have different opinion, but to me, you need a platform for you to basically create attention and awareness. You can choose to be a TikTok, like you can choose that to be your platform. You could be an Instagram Reels person. You could be a Facebook Stories person. You could be a LinkedIn Stories person, right? But what you are trying to do on social media, and so many people get this wrong. You should not be trying to close business on social media. Social media is where you engage and get attention. You are building a following for one purpose, to pull them off of that platform and put them into your ecosystem. All right. The way we started doing marketing back before social media existed and before retargeting was a thing is we built lists. We built email lists. Now, before email, there was direct mail list, and Brian Kurtz will always remind me of that. But an email list in the digital age is really where you want to be. We don't own a platform. As we're sitting here, Devin, the government is talking about doing a TikTok ban. Well, what if you've put your entire hope and budget into building a TikTok following that gets shut off by the government? Okay. Now, can the same thing happen with email? Can you be delisted? Yeah, you probably can. But the fact of the matter is, you've got a better chance at creating a community of people in your own ecosystem versus on somebody others. So what I tell people is use social media. If TikTok is your preference, create attention, create awareness, and drive people into your ecosystem. Get them on an email list, get them into your private community. And by the way, don't build a community on Facebook because they could take your community away like that. Build your own ecosystem and create that with your people. That is how you're going to achieve success on social media. I don't know if I answer your question directly, but that's kind of the advice I'm giving people because the warning signs are there.
Well, the takeaway is great, right? You got to control the process. And I think that
Yeah.
that's unique perspective on social media because a lot of it is where do we post? How often do we post? Frequency, messaging, images, videos, whatever. We can get into all that. And there are best
Yeah.
practices and whatever. But at the end of the day, it is a tool somewhere in your pipeline process. And I love your takeaway of control the data.
Yeah.
And so if you're not moving the conversation to your CRM or an email database or somewhere where you can lastingly control it, it's the same advice I give to people when they're like, yeah, all my contacts are in the XYZ company I work for's data. Well, what happens when they let go of you and lock you out of your whole database you built for the last 10 years?
Yeah.
Like you need to control your data as a professional, as a business owner. So whatever tools and platforms you're using, make sure it ends up somewhere where you control it. That's amazing advice. I love that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes from experience, right? Like I've seen a lot. I've been in direct marketing since 1998. So I've seen the evolution. I've seen how things have changed, but I also see I also see how platforms could really affect things. You know, for me, being in the Facebook space, writing a book about Facebook in 2020, iOS 14, which is on Apple, literally changed the ability for you to retarget. I mean, they took away Facebook and Instagram's ability to track users and retarget. One of the most powerful innovations that Facebook and Instagram had was the ability to retarget. iOS 14 essentially took that away. So all of a sudden, overnight, you weren't building up this invisible audience, like I called it, and it literally changed the way you did Facebook ads. In fact, it drove a lot of people away from Facebook ads, kind of took away a whole business segment for me, right? So, you know, are you going to build your business on somebody's platform when they could turn a switch and immediately shut you off? It's a big risk, right? But I've seen it happen more times than not. Am I surprised that the government's talking about banning TikTok? Well, no, because, you know, it's kind of originates in China. It's a political hotbed out there. Why wouldn't the government want to meddle in something like that, right? So don't build your community in places that you don't own. You know, don't build it on land. You're not even renting the land. It's free. um so, you know, build your community in places that you have more control over. You know, Devin, you've got a couple communities built. If they shut off all the online platforms, you would still be able to gather with your community. You know, that's you need to have that kind of insurance in your business.
Love that. What about tools? So we've talked, you kind of highlighted that there are tools. Anything that is intriguing you or you're looking into, just tools people may want to check out or look at? And none of this is endorsed, by the way. We're just,
Yeah.
when you're in it, sometimes you see cool stuff. And so any cool stuff you're seeing?
Yeah. So a tool that I use, I literally used it today. You know, I've got this whole editing team, but when I want to do some fast editing is Descript. The ability to, you basically can edit a video by editing the text, which is very powerful. So Descript is a good video. We've been using Chat GPT a lot and really discovering kind of what things you could do and learning to create prompts to help us help our clients. There's a lot of great tools out there. Repurpose IO is another one that a number of clients use. That's, you can take long form video. So let's say you do a Facebook Live or a LinkedIn Live. You could upload that to that platform or upload it to YouTube, and Repurpose IO will create shorts for you. There's a lot of those tools, and literally there's just tools coming out every day. It's like there's an explosion. So tools that I use, Descript is, I've got that one, and I have Repurpose IO, and there's a couple other tools that we use. Don't get caught up in the technology though. Find a tool. Tools should only be used if it's going to save you time and leverage, give you a little bit more leverage. You're going to be better off spending time on doing $100, $1,000, $10,000 an hour work. The rest you need to look to outsource or use tools for.
Love that. And to summarize that, because I mean, obviously, I was on your podcast earlier. You're sitting here now, and so we're
Yeah.
both playing with video. And what's awesome is, you know, two of those tools I use tools that are similar. And so I guess the takeaway I would give people from that answer is editing video via text is something that works, and it does save you
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of time. And so if you do catch yourself trying to dabble in video editing and you're still dragging the timestamps, please stop, unless you're a pro. And so I use
Yeah.
Pictory, which is
Oh
very
yeah.
similar to what you're using. I bought their lifetime membership, and so I'm in it.
Nice.
And then I use Video Snap as well to take long form and turn it into short form, and they do B-roll and whatever else. And so,
Yeah.
but again, that's the second thing you mentioned is like if you're looking for a way to take your long form and repurpose it into short form with some B-roll and some other stuff, that's the tool. You can just go Google, and there are 100 tools. Find the one that works for you, the price tag that works, and just use it if it saves you time. Otherwise,
Yeah.
outsource all of it.
Yeah. Yep, I think editing, like we tell people in the video game, the lowest level activity that you can find really talented people to do is editing. And once they get to know what you want, they get to know you, it's going to be a worthwhile investment. One-off stuff that you can do it by yourself, yeah, some of those other tools are really powerful as well.
That's epic, man. So let's talk about mistakes. So we've talked about a lot of the positives, the tips, the whatever. So like, where could people go wrong when it comes to video? Like, what are some things to avoid?
So one of the things we like to tell people, like one of our mantras in our company, is ditch the script. The reason we say that is scripts make people sound robotic. Unless you're an actor or a newscaster, you're really not good at doing video. I mean, people inherently aren't good at doing video unless they're trained. So when you try to do scripts, what ends up happening is your energy gets really small and you actually lower trust. People look at that and go, well, she's reading a script, right? So I'm being sold. There's just this subconscious thing going on. So we believe the better way. So if you're going to do this yourself and use our method, which is question and answer, even if you're producing it yourself in your office, have somebody behind the camera who's asking you a question. So to me, one of the big mistakes would be to spend so much time fine tuning a script that you're really never going to deliver. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is people get caught up in equipment, right? One of our favorite things is when we get on a Zoom with a prospect, they love to tell us the story of all the equipment that they bought that they don't use. So, they've got the digital, the DSLR, they've got this studio, they've got all the equipment and they meant well, right? Like they got into it. It's kind of like you buy a treadmill, it's right. You buy the gym membership, like you've got all the tools, but you never use it. Use the tools you have. Like we're all carrying around a Google Pixel, iPhone, or Samsung phone with, again, the most powerful video camera that's ever been produced in human history. Just use the tools at your disposal. What I'll tell people though is have a good audio device. One of the things that kills audio is sound, believe it or not. It's not the picture, it's actually the sound. So we like to say, I'm using a kind of a microphone here for interviews. When I'll create videos, I'll either use this microphone or I'll use a lav mic that's connected to my phone device. Sound is really critical. So you don't want to make it so that people get distracted because they can't hear you or the volume's not right. It's kind of weird to say like the biggest mistake you make in video is audio, but it's true. And then I think the third mistake would be that you get caught up and edit your own video. I just want people to understand, like when you look at the mirror in the morning, you're not always happy with what you see. Can you imagine how critical you are when you're in a performance mode? The hardest thing to do is to edit yourself. Like you will paralyze yourself trying to edit because you're not going to like how you sound. You're not going to like how you look. And you are going to spend so much time critiquing yourself that you're going to totally miss the point of the video. So we like to say, you create the video, let somebody else do the editing because you are never going to get past your own worst critic, which is yourself.
More great advice. And I love that side of it, right? I love we always got to talk about the don'ts because people need to know, like, and to your point, people always ask, like, what video saw. I can tell you what video for me has closed the most. It's me sitting in the car, usually post a meeting with the phone sitting on the steering wheel, recording something very emotional or passionate that just happened. Hey, I just wrapped this meeting up. Here's what happened. I had to share with you right now. And it's real, it's authentic, it's dirty, it's whatever. But that seems to be the one that my audience goes and just like engages with because I don't have the fancy background and I'm not sitting in the office and it doesn't feel format, like it feels real. And so I've just taught myself, like, you know what? It's also momentary. Like you're gonna post the video and there's how much content? How much content goes up a day? Hundreds of thousands of minutes, millions of minutes. I mean, just
it's uncalculable.
And so it doesn't matter. Like you're a glimpse in time. Like just post it and let's go. Unless again, you're trying to build content to fit a strategy, then you have to be intentional.
Right. So, the one thing that you kind of touched on there, the setting is kind of cool. Like people are used to creating videos in cars and things like that. So it's not unusual. But what you did was you actually triggered a hormonal release in somebody's brain. If you can tell a story that generates empathy. So when you have raw emotions and are vulnerable and you create this sense of empathy in your audience, they're going to lean in and be connected to you. That releases a hormone. If you can get somebody to laugh, right? You get endorphins released. If you could get them at the edge of their seat. So like if you know, when you're watching a really good movie and it's suspenseful, you know, there's a hormone that's released. So you'll find that your best videos are the ones where you trigger emotions that actually cause a physical change in the brain, where the brain actually demands a certain chemical be released. That's probably why that video worked. It's because there was something empathetic, or there's something suspenseful in that. When you get raw, when you get vulnerable, that's when people really pay attention. So if you think of all these videos that get pushed out and it's like, here's content, more content, learn how to do this. Like they're pushing content and it's all education. And here you come with something very personal and very sincere. That's what you want. You know, I get a lot of newsletters in the mail. Like I care less about the instruction, and I really like page 1 or the last page, whatever the author decides to do, is like, what's going on in my life. You know, these are friends of mine. I want to know what's going on in Perry's life. You know, I want to know what's going on in Victor's life. Like, I want to know what that person's doing, like personally. I want to know what they care about. That's the type of stuff your audience really wants to know. And the businesses that you see doing well are the ones that are sharing themselves. They're telling people who they are, not what they do, and they're being really authentic with them. That's really what's required in the age of AI, where content is completely free and being pushed down your throat.
Love it. Well, let's transition to the last few questions I like to ask. So first, recommended book. Always like to get a recommended book from whoever I'm talking to. So what's something you've read recently or something you think people should check out?
Yeah, so spent a couple days when I wasn't golfing, was at the beach. I read Atomic Habits. Really, really solid book. And of course, the author is going to escape me. Really popular book right now. Tim Ferriss had him on his podcast. Really solid book. Really affected me. And it's one I'm taking a lot of notes on. A book kind of on the spiritual side is a book by Neil Donald Walsh called Conversations with God. Really impactful for me in my spiritual journey. Is another one that I've read recently. Actually, kind of a whole series from him. And then, you know, another book. I want to plug a friend's book. Perry Marshall wrote a book called 80/20 Sales and Marketing, and it's still a book. It's 12 years old, maybe. It's still a book I refer to. It's just really sound fundamental marketing principles. So that's another book that I would recommend if you were just trying to get washed in marketing fundamentals. 80/20 Sales and Marketing is a really good book to have at your disposal.
Perfect. Some good takeaways there. A couple new ones on the list. So I love that. It's always funny because you record enough podcasts, and it's interesting because I'll usually get one or two of the same book recommendations back to back.
Yeah.
And it's always weird because you do so many and the timing's never like no one knows. And so it's cool when it's always totally unique. Atomic Habits, though, I have seen trending a lot. So definitely
Yeah.
something to check out.
It's James. I can't make out the last name. It's James.
That's all right. We'll tag it wherever you guys are listening. All those
Yeah.
books will be linked.
You'll figure it
The other
out.
question I like to ask is, what's some advice for your younger self? If you look back at your journey, what's something you would tell the younger you?
Oh man. There's a lot of growth you do. Brandon, my partner, likes to say that the greatest personal development course is being an entrepreneur. So I'm one that will look back and go, oh my goodness, like, why did you say that? Or why did you do that? So part of it is allow yourself to be present for where you're at. Just know that where you're at today and the things that you think are completely like, I've got it all nailed down, you're going to look at 5 years from now and go, I didn't know a damn thing. You're like, I had it all wrong. Give yourself grace. It's something that I'm working on, certainly, which is like, allow yourself to go through the process. What you think is great today, you're going to look back and go, well, it's not so great now. So give yourself grace to say, at this point in time, it was what I was supposed to be doing, and it was good for my development, and it got me to this point. Something, it's advice that I'm still giving myself and working on, but I think it would be really good advice for my younger self to say, hey, give yourself grace in the future for the stuff that I'm doing now.
Perfect. So how do people connect with you? How do you want people to reach out? What's the best way to sync up with Bob? And if something here resonates with them?
Yeah, I love to refer people to a couple places. So feedstories.com, that's plural, feedstories.com. That'd be the place to connect with us if video is something that you need help with. And a new resource that we've just released, which we're really proud of and want to get people's hands on, is a new tool we developed called the Strategic Story Playbook, strategicstoryplaybook.com. We built a tool that helps people organize and kind of structure their stories, and it can grow and evolve with where you're at. Really proud of that tool. It'll be a tool that lives online. We'll constantly update it, but it's literally kind of the playbook that we use with our clients, and it's something that we want to release to a wider audience and impact a lot more people. So that's strategicstoryplaybook.com.
Awesome, man. Hey, is there anything we missed? I know we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything you feel like we missed when it comes to video or marketing that's just on your heart and you want to share?
No, the one thing I always want to share with people is as I get older, and we mentioned this on our show when you're on our show, is focus on who you are versus what you do. I'm trying to do more in terms of my day-to-day life and my professional life, getting interested in who people are versus what they do. Part of what we like to do on our podcast is get to know people's background and their stories, and what they do just kind of oozes out. But when you really get down to that, so as you're thinking about video, really focus in on that. Share with people who you are. As we get more entrenched in AI and the world becomes more digital, there's going to be this opposite energy that is just crave for in the world, which is authenticity. So we want to be the company, we want to be the people that are encouraging others to be their authentic self, to share who they are, and to really be authentic and share their gifts with the world. I think that's going to be sorely needed. It's going to be craved, and those that embrace that are going to be really successful, no matter what the machines end up doing in our lives.
Awesome, Bob. Well, I appreciate you taking time, man. I know you're busy. I know you guys are grinding. I appreciate you pulling back the curtain and showing and sharing and telling your stories. Thanks for taking time.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Devin.